Good morning, everybody. Eli Perry here, back with another installment of our video on the function and the effects of propaganda in the modern world. Now, today we want to talk about a psychological phenomenon which is one of the reasons that all forms of propaganda are as effective as they are. And in order to discuss this, first we need to discuss the importance of groups in humans, because closed informational spaces, closed psychological spaces, echo chambers, if you will, are a function of group dynamics. The reason that groups are important, and the reason that so many of these propaganda tricks are designed to work on groups and then on the individuals within those groups, is because we humans, in an evolutionary sense, if you look at our history as animals, we have not been the dominant species on this earth for very long. Humans and human precursor species have been making tools which allowed us to influence our environment, to harvest food more easily, and to defend ourselves for, depending on the type of tool, somewhere between 3 and 1.25 million years. But we only became, modern humans as we recognize them. So Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans, let's say, the broad sort of bat family of the human species, around about 500,000 to 300,000 years ago, depending on whose sources you read. And for most of this time, we were, in comparison to the stuff that we hunted and the stuff that was hunting us, we were small, slow, weak, and weakly armed. An individual human by itself on the African savanna is lion chow in about 12 hours, right? But humans, like all primates, are social animals. We live in groups together for mutual support, for mutual defense, and because it's a hell of a lot easier getting your hands on lots and lots of food if you have a group to do it. We primates, of which humans are one, are animals with very large, very powerful brains. We have binocular color vision. Humans are habitually bipedal. These are things that require enormous amounts of calories. And in particular, they require enormous amounts of animal fat and amino acids. Getting your hands on that many calories and those specific nutrients is a much easier job if you've got 8 or 10 or 15 people doing it instead of 1 or 2. Defending the group is much easier if you have a number of people to do it. If you don't have enough people to keep an effective watch through the night, your only option for staying safe, and in an area with leopards in it, even this is not terribly helpful, is building a nest up in a tree and hoping for the best. So we form groups. Within those groups, humans go a long way to avoid drama, because drama fractures the group. It breaks the group down, it makes the group smaller, and that makes the group less effective at all of those jobs that we need it to do. It defeats the purpose of having a group in the first place. And so humans will form these closed communication spaces specifically in order to reduce the amount of drama, to reduce the amount of fighting within the group. And this is a drive that we have probably had for much of that 1.5 million, let's be super conservative here, years that we've been becoming what we now are. So, with that in mind, let's take a look at something called the Woozle Effect. Pardon me. Some of you are already familiar with the term. The Woozle Effect is something that is taught in academia, it's something that's taught in military colleges, it's something that's taught in medical schools. Anywhere you go, where being able to understand not just what you know, but how you know it is important. Where chain of citation and provenance of information are important, the Woozle Effect, maybe not by this name, but the Woozle Effect is described. The name comes to us from one of A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh stories. Most of you are familiar with this, in which Piglet discovers Pooh tracking an unknown animal, possibly a woozle, in the snow. And going along for mutual support, he and Pooh follow the tracks in the snow in a long, sweeping curve around a large grove of trees. After some time, they discovered that now instead of only one set of footprints, there are two sets of the same kind of footprint. So now they are potentially following two woozles. Earlier in the story, in the book, they have had a couple of what they think are near misses with this unknown animal. They do not know what a woozle is. They do not know what it looks like. They do not know what its footprints look like, but they are convinced that it is a real thing. They keep following the footprints, and sometime later they discover that a third animal with different footprints has joined the first two. So now they're looking at a situation where at least three animals of two different types, possibly dangerous, are ahead of them. And they continue following these footprints, again, around the grove of trees. A few minutes later, Christopher Robin, who's been climbing one of the trees, explains to them that they have been following their own footprints in the snow. Everyone is very embarrassed and everyone goes home. But this has been used to name the psychological phenomenon that occurs when first one person puts a piece of information, a fact, out into the world without verifying it. Now, this fact could be true. It could be a mistake. It could be a lie. It could be incomplete. It could be out-of-date information. It could be something that everybody knows. It could be something that is just common sense. It could be an urban legend. It could be something that people are saying or I'm hearing. But what doesn't matter is that person A has put this information out there without providing its provenance. He doesn't know where this fact came from. Then another person picks up on this fact and they believe it. They tell someone else. So person A has stated the fact, person B has believed the fact, person B has told person C. If person C asks person B where they got the fact, they cite person A, right? So then person C tells person D. Person D asks person C how they know it. They cite person B and person A, and it goes on and on and on. The woozle is out there. The fact, in this case, is the woozle, the existence of the woozle. And before long, you've got a whole load of people believing something that really they have no way to verify. Because if they follow the chain of citation back up, they get to person A, who put this fact out there without verifying it in the first place. Person A, at this point, has no citation. What often happens is that after this has gone on for long enough, someone fairly early up the chain, maybe not person A, but person B or person C, hears from someone further down the chain, let's say person H, about this fact, and they say, aha, I knew it. I didn't know at the time where that fact came from, but person H is citing person G. Right? Person G is citing person F. So it doesn't look to person B, let's say, as if the chain is going all the way back to him, but it is. And before long, the circle has been closed. B cites A, C cites B, and now A is citing C. And all of this assumes that person A put this piece of information out there believing that it was true, but often it's not. One of the things that propagandists love to do is to start woozle hunts. Person A states a fact, a piece of information, the start of the propaganda chain. It gets picked up. Eventually, person B or person C starts citing person J, closes the loop, job done. This fact has now entered the sort of collective consciousness of the people inside that informational space. And the thing about closed informational spaces is, because they don't want drama, remember, they don't want to break the group up, closed information spaces try to keep Christopher Robin out of the discussion. They don't want the drama that comes with somebody coming in and telling them that something they believe is an error or a lie or out of date. So with Christopher Robin out of the discussion, the woozle, now in the collective mind of the people inside that closed space, exists. It's real. They're going to act as if this thing is true, even if it isn't. Right? We've seen this, as I mentioned the other day, in response to the hurricanes. Woozles get started, and then people start behaving as if the woozle is real, because they think that there are citations, that there is provenance to this information that is proving it, but really it just goes back to one person talking out of their ass. Then you get into situations where the woozle has been set loose on purpose, for the purposes of changing the behavior of that group. I first came across the phrase woozle hunt about, well, the Woozle Effect, about 2 years ago. I came across a video from an angry Scottish pig called Shut the Fuck Up About the F-35. Now, for those of you who don't know, which I imagine is about 2 people in the world at this point, the F-35 is the United States military's newest, latest, greatest strike fighter. It is very expensive. It is very striking, fitting. Although personally, I think the competition would have been even funnier because the plane that lost the design challenge was one of those things that's so ugly it's beautiful. But that to one side. For many years, there was this woozle that the F-35 was an expensive toad of a plane. That it couldn't fly, that it couldn't fight, that it couldn't sense, that it was way too expensive, and that basically it was just a grift to allow corrupt lobbyists and industry figures to skim money off of the enormous American defense budget. And for a long time, I believed that, honestly. For one thing, I was a fan, not yet knowing how out of touch and divorced from reality these people were. For a while in my younger days, in my early 20s, I was a fan of a group of former Air Force and Air Force adjacent people that are known by people who wish to be flattering as the reformers, by people who are a bit more familiar with them and their tactics as the fighter mafia. And in particular, I was attracted to these guys because of some of the woozles that were out there in the popular military, historical, and defense press, about a couple of them, in particular a fellow named John Boyd. And then something rather interesting happened. I started to notice that, countries that don't have enormous defense budgets are buying the F-35. Now, there is some precedent to this sort of thing happening before. There was an incident, an infamous incident, when Lockheed Martin spent enormous sums of money bribing various governments, most notably West Germany, to buy their F-104 starfighter. And this turned out to be a really bad idea. Because not having the money to spend it on any other planes to do other things, the West Germans decided that they would just make the F-104 do everything. Now, the F-104 was very good at the one job that it was built to do, but because they'd spent all their money on the F-104, the West Germans didn't have any money for other planes to do other jobs, and they decided to make the starfighter do everything. As a result of this, over a third of their starfighter fleet was destroyed in crashes, and something over 200 very talented, very skilled, beautifully trained pilots were killed. So there was some precedent for things like Lockheed Martin bribing people to buy a subpar airplane. But, a lot of governments had learned from that. And that didn't make a whole lot of sense. And I had spent a couple of years trying to sort of square that circle when I came across Laserpig's video. And almost immediately I recognized the face of a guy named Pierre Spray. And I recognized that he was giving an interview on Russia Today. And I hunted down that woozle. I listened to what Laserpig had to say, and then I thought, you know what, this all sounds a little bit too convenient. This sounds like it might be a conspiracy theory. I'm going to chase this down. And it turned out that the angry, drunken, gay Scottish pig was absolutely right. The whole thing, all of the F-35's horrible reputation, had started with a series of interviews that Spray did on Russia Today in the early to mid 2000s. And they were all about how the F-35 was a piece of junk and a waste of money, and the rest of the world should, at most, be spending their money on F-16s, which Spray took credit for designing. That struck a note with me because the reason I recognized Spray is because in the sort of aeronautics, aviation buff community, he's known as an unrepentant charlatan who made a lifelong habit of claiming credentials he didn't have, claiming connections he never made, and doing a sort of two-part dance of denigrating a given system or technology right up until the point that it proved that it was good, at which point he began claiming credit for designing it in the first place. He claimed credit for designing the F-16, the F-15, and the A-10. He had nothing to do with any of those projects. Nothing at all. And I knew this. And I suddenly realized that, holy shit, this was a woozle. Spray had started a woozle. Why in the world would the Russians want to convince everybody that a new American stealth strike fighter was bad? Oh dear. Yeah. Woozle hunts are often started in order to, within closed informational spaces, drive action away from good actions. When you're driving action, you can drive people towards good or towards bad, right? Up or down. You can drive them towards something useful or drive them towards something useless or drive them towards something harmful. This particular woozle hunt appeared to be geared to driving people towards something harmful, not buying an aircraft that, for all intents and purposes and appearances, is a really, really good piece of kit. The Israelis have used their F-35s in airstrikes in heavily defended airspace, including airspace defended by the latest Russian surface-to-air missile systems and radar nets. And as far as I know, it's never even been acquired on radar, let alone fired at, far much less alone hit. It's not a silver bullet, because nothing is. But it looks like old Pierre Spray was, once again, talking out of his ass. And a whole bunch of aviation buffs, me included, spent anywhere between 10 and 20 years chasing that woozle around the grove of trees. Now, the other interesting thing about woozle hunts is that they are a wonderful tool for a classic Soviet-Russian propaganda technique known as whataboutism. Because if person A is a malicious actor, if they are starting this woozle hunt for malignant propagandistic purposes, one of the things they do is the minute somebody starts asking them, how do they know? Where did they get the fact that started the woozle hunt in the first place? They immediately start another woozle hunt, and then another, and then another. So that in order to deal with woozle hunt number 1, you have to deal with number 2, 3, and 4. It's an endless, exhausting business, which makes it perfect for the mental jamming that no reality propaganda is so prone to. It's a multi-purpose thing. Within that closed informational space, the woozle hunt becomes alternate reality propaganda. In the larger information space, outside of that echo chamber, it serves no reality propaganda. It's 2 for the price of 1. And the big thing is that because it is something that all humans are prone to doing, and in this video, or in this series of videos, I am going to discuss other woozle hunts that I have been on, woozles that I thought were real, right? Nobody's immune to this. And because of that, sometimes very, very, very smart people fall for woozles. And this is important because nobody has enough time or energy to chase down the information provenance of everything they hear. We all have a list in our heads of people and sources that we regard as trustworthy. If one of those people or sources on that list tells us a fact, we believe them. Or at very least, we don't put a whole lot of effort into chasing it down. There's a reason that every time Bob Woodward writes a new book, everybody runs out and buys it. And there's a reason that Bob Woodward has got so many political hides on his wall, because he's proven himself to be a trustworthy source over many, many years. And so when he says something, people believe him. Everybody's got that list. But if somebody on your list of trusted sources falls for a woozle, there's a good chance that you will too. And so if a malignant actor finds a way to change the beliefs and change the behavior of smart people, of people who are trusted, of people who are on a lot of mental lists, that's half their work done right there. Why go to all the effort of fooling 10 million stupid people when you can fool 5 smart people just as easily and have them do the work for you? In our next couple of videos, we're going to be discussing specific woozle hunts, smart people who got fooled, and what the results of that have been. A quick aside, well, 2 quick asides. First off, in my last video, anybody who didn't read the notes on that video, I want to extend an apology. I misidentified Chernenko in a couple of cases and Zhirinovsky in a couple of cases in that video. You can find the timestamps and the corrections for that in the notes of video number 3, my last video. Second, I got a response from somebody who asked me essentially why I discussed alternate reality propaganda and its relationship with truth in the context of the Soviet Union, because so many people in the Soviet Union could look around and see the gap between truth and reality, and they weren't believing it. How can I say that the alternate reality propaganda active in the Soviet Union was based on the idea that truth is knowable? Here's the thing. If people believe that there is a reality, but that the truth is not it, that doesn't negate the concept of truth, reality, existing in the first place. Remember, truth and truth or reality are 2 different things. And one of the things that I've learned from a lifetime of reading and studying and knowing Russian and former Soviet citizens is that very early on, at their mother's breast, every Soviet citizen learned that the truth was out there, reality did exist, but that the official line wasn't it. Many of them learned to believe that if the party said the sky was blue, really the sky was green. Whatever the party said was not the truth, but that the truth did exist. This is another one of the reasons that no reality propaganda became so important in the latter days of the Soviet Union. Because this idea that truth existed and the party line wasn't it, well, that was a problem. In order to eliminate that discrepancy in people's minds, they had to get rid of the whole idea that truth existed at all. So they did. All right, that's going to be it for today, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and as I've gotten into the habit of saying, don't trust but verify. Just verify. Kill the woozles. Have a good one.